Hey guys, I've been getting a lot of people sending me messages about a Titanfall 2 developer or something talking about the Switch in, I guess, a bad manner. Anyway, I checked out the video and I was a little confused because right away you could tell that they were drinking. I assume he was probably heavily buzzed or definitely not all there. But anyway, I watched the video and he seemed to think that there was absolutely no way that Titanfall 2 could be moved over to the Switch. Now, honestly, I think Titanfall 2 could run on the Switch if they wanted it to. However, I honestly don't think Nintendo really wants Titanfall 2 on the Switch. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Titanfall 2 a lot. I think it was probably the best shooter last year, especially in the holiday season. But it didn't sell well at all. Like, it was actually a really bad selling game. And in the video, they kind of talk about a little bit about the Switch. The Titanfall developer seems to not be very interested in the Switch at all, whereas the other two guys actually seem to kind of put out very fair analysis of the Switch, the good and the bad, what looks interesting, what could use work, and you know what, there's good and bad to the Switch, there is. And to see the Titanfall 2 developer just really not give any credence at all to the Switch and just kind of attack it and destroy it looks kind of bad, honestly, for EA in their division. Obviously, you have somebody like that snubbing a system that could potentially be good for EA in the long run if the system sells. And this is really why these companies have PR agencies, because these developers, while I'm sure they're very talented coders, very talented people in terms of game creation, they're not very good when it comes to putting out statements for the press. Anyway, let me talk a little bit about why Nintendo probably does not want Titanfall 2. More than likely, what happened between Nintendo and EA when they talked about getting a game on the Switch, because from a lot of talks, EA really wants to test the waters with the Switch. I don't blame them at all, because the Wii U obviously was not the best-selling system, did not do a lot for Nintendo's third parties. It didn't really do much for Nintendo, let's be honest. And it does look like Nintendo's trying to at least revamp their system with actual updated hardware when it comes to programming with Vulkan, DirectX 12, all of that good stuff. And it's interesting to me that the person for Titanfall 2 seems to think that Nintendo might want it and they're just telling him it's not possible. I can tell you now, the talks between EA went like this. This is what happened. Nintendo probably went there and said, look, we need a good selling game from you guys. If you only want to provide one, what's your suggestion for a game that would sell in mass around the world? EA came back and said FIFA, and Nintendo said, all right, let's do it. If I was Nintendo and EA even offered Titanfall 2, I would probably say, hey, let's keep looking, because that game barely sold 1 million copies on the PS4, and the PS4 has a 50 million user install base. In fact, it wouldn't shock me at all if EA actually tried to push Titanfall 2 to the Switch at all, because that game needs to sell. If I was a developer for Titanfall 2, you make an awesome game, like really an awesome game, and here are games like Battlefield 1, which is by the same people, by the way. It's by EA. So EA obviously pushing Battlefield 1 harder because the name is stronger tells me that they just don't have as much confidence in Titanfall, for example, and they had no problem leaving that game behind quickly. And you have games like Battlefield 1 selling better. You have games like Call of Duty selling better, which to me, honestly, are inferior games to Titanfall 2. This is my opinion, of course. Some people may like Battlefield 1, some people may like Call of Duty. But with the backlash that Call of Duty gets, and the praising reviews that Titanfall 2 gets, I would be super mad, like really annoyed if I was a developer like this guy, and Titanfall 2 is getting almost like Oscar nominees, and no one's buying it. Also, guys, let's talk about the first Titanfall, because that game did not run well on the Xbox One, ran terribly on the 360, but they still put it on the 360. You know what system it was they were actually trying to put it on at one point with Sony talking to them? They were going to move it to the Vita. Yes, they were going to try to figure out a way to put Titanfall 1 on a Vita, a system that is vastly underpowered compared to the Switch, and they were going to try to put it on there. So he's telling me that if they wanted to, they couldn't put Titanfall 2 on the Switch. Yeah, they probably could. Trust me, guys, in this situation, money talks. If the Switch would make EA enough money and bolster any sales for honestly, what is a very disappointing launch for Titanfall 2, and will probably continue to be disappointing, they will take any avenue they can to make that work. And if it means moving it over to the Switch, they would do that. I just don't think Nintendo wants to waste their time with that, because they already know it's not going to sell. If it's not going to sell on the PS4, why would it sell on the Switch? Also, you kind of need to point out here that this seems to be the guy's first look at the Switch, or at least real in-depth look, because they kind of watched the Switch reveal with the guy, and so he has no knowledge of hardware capabilities of the system, or he doesn't have a dev kit. None of that stuff is happening with him. So really, guys, his opinion should be taken just the same as anyone else on the internet, including mine or yours or somebody down in the comments. So I would not get too riled up about this. I saw a lot of people make really long videos about this one guy and what his opinion means. Really, it doesn't mean much. Just to be completely honest with you, it doesn't mean anything. In business, guys, money talks for everything. That's why the Wii got so much support, because it was printing money. That's the way it works. That's why the PS4 gets so much support, because there's a 50 million user install base. So even if you release your system and it sells to 10% of the users, there you go. You just 5 million copies move. Guys, this is a very quick video. Like I said, I just want to touch on this. I really didn't want to make a long video on this because it doesn't warrant a long video. It really doesn't. But guys, check me out tomorrow. I think I might do a tech wave tomorrow too for an older system I like. And I also got 3D glasses I think we might check out as well, which could be interesting because they will be very similar to what we could expect VR to be like with the Switch. So I'll be doing that tomorrow, guys. Check me out then. I will see you next time.